Hello, this is Coach Wilson, and this is Chapter 1, Section 2. Today we're going to pick up with who are United States citizens. All right, so we're beginning our first chapter in civics and talking about what is civics, what are citizens, and kind of defining our government. Now, U.S. immigration is something that has become a little bit of a confusing subject to some, mainly because immigration laws change rapidly. All right, it's something that's constantly being reformed and adjusted. Uh, some terms you need to be familiar with, some things you need to be familiar with. First of all, is a quota. Anytime you talk about immigration laws, especially through the early 1900s into the 1950s and so on, there's always been these quotas that were put in place of a limit to immigration. And a quota is a specific number. And when they set quotas, it means they're going to let in a specific number of immigrants into the country in order to try to um, limit its effect on the economy, limit its effect on different communities. Because as you bring in new immigrants, those immigrants have to be able to find jobs if they're trying to become citizens. All right. If we just let in everybody, then your citizens who are already here, who have been established citizens, now are going to have trouble finding jobs when those immigrants could have found a job in their home country. Okay. Now, when we say immigrants, I think a lot of times we think of immigrants coming from Mexico and immigrants coming from England and immigrants coming from Japan. Guys, there's immigrants coming from all over the world that want to try to come to America. It's not just those three areas. So that it's important you kind of understand that immigration refers to anyone in the world who tries to immigrate to our country. Now, the Immigration Act of 1990 was passed, which put a quota in place that was set at 675,000 immigrants per year. Now, refugees do not count against that quota. So when we talk about immigrants, we're talking about those people who are going to try to immigrate to become citizens. Now, Immigration Reform and Control Act was also passed, making it easier to come to the United States to reduce illegal immigration. And one of the reasons that the United States has passed some of these laws is, there's obviously a huge issue between connecting countries. Anytime that there's a connecting country, that immigrants can kind of, go border to border without, any problems. And it's one of the reasons there's been such a controversy over the last couple of years in the United States of, we have border issues, we have immigration issues because of how close the countries are. So these acts were passed in order to try and make it easier for immigrants to get to the United States and hopefully try to reduce some of that illegal immigration. And it's important, and we're going to go back here for just a second. It's important to understand, guys, one of the reasons that people are so vocal about immigration is because that means that you have taxes, you have a documentation, all of those things that citizens of a country pay or are forced to do protects the rest of the nation. For example, I go to work, I get a job, I pay my taxes on the wages that I make from my job. Someone who comes in illegally and they don't have they don't have to pay taxes, then in that case, that person can make any money they make, they can hold on to the whole sum of it. Now, with that said, one of the things that's become very popular in immigration in the United States is people will get a hold of old Social Security numbers and they will file taxes under that number, which is kind of chancy in itself because if the United States IRS figures it out, Internal Revenue Service, who audits taxes and who you file your taxes to, if they figure it out, then they're going to come after that person and try to deport them and send them back to their home country. But there's a lot to that. But anyways, naturalization, okay? And this is a term that you need to be familiar with, but when we talk about naturalization, that is just the process of becoming a citizen. First of all, you have to apply for a permanent visa. All right, that means that you have they give you a little card and it says that you are allowed to be in the United States. Okay, so you're not a citizen yet, but you are allowed to be in the United States based on your immigration. You then would apply for citizenship. Your application is either approved or denied, most likely. If you've been given a permanent visa and you apply for citizenship, a lot of times it's going to go ahead and be approved. But then there's other things that you have to do following that. You have to get fingerprinted. That's important. That fingerprint goes in a database that protects you, protects your identity. Interview and pass tests, which include civics, United States history, and English. So that in itself is a tough process on some. I mean, think about if you've lived in a country where they don't speak English at all, and you try to immigrate to the United States because you're trying to get away from maybe a war, maybe a cartel, whatever it may be. You try to immigrate and then you get here and get a permanent visa, but you can't ever become a citizen because you can't pass the test. And over the course of history, we've seen these tests kind of evolve and become different things. Back in the 60s and 70s, and way before that, back in the 1860s and on, there's been all sorts of tests put in place to try to hinder immigrants, but I don't think that's necessarily the case as much anymore. It's more so now just ensuring that we're getting quality immigrants into the United States who are going to help build the country and support the country. And obviously with the threat of terrorism from overseas and various places, we have to be very thorough in those interviews. You also need to take the oath of allegiance to the United States. Okay, and that's once you've interviewed and passed all of your tests. This process can take from 7 to 11 years, and you must be 18 years old. Okay. Now, one thing I do want to talk about that's very important, and this is kind of an interesting situation. If you are born in another country, okay, or you are born in this country, you automatically are a citizen of this country, or in some cases of that country. Now, it's kind of a tricky process, but I'd have to go delve deeper into it to make sure I'm telling you this right. If you're born, let's say your parents are Americans and you're born in England, okay, you come back from England, you technically can become a citizen of the United States, even though you were born in England as a child because your parents are citizens. Okay, the United States government generally does not hold that against people, in my understanding of it. But the cool part about that is you can also be a citizen of Great Britain or of England, which would make you have dual citizenship, where you can actually be a citizen of two countries. Now, a naturalized citizen cannot run for president. So in order to run for president, you have to be born in the United States and be a citizen that did not go through the immigration process. Basically, you have to be born into it. You can't just come over and then run for president. And part of that is to protect our country from foreign agents who may try to come in and become a political figure after they become a citizen and try to take over our country. That's at least the goal. An alien is a non-citizen. We talked about that a little bit in our first day of notes. They cannot vote or hold public office. All right, so those are people who have come from another country. Maybe it's an immigrant. Maybe it's, in some cases it could be an illegal alien, which means that they are here without cause. Okay, you hear about illegal aliens all the time, which we're not talking about kind of come down from space. We're talking about those who come in the country who are non-citizens, cannot vote. Immigration and Naturalization Service handles all immigration cases. So anytime there's an issue with immigration, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, they're going to be the ones that handle it. INS, as the designation goes, is responsible for deportations, reviewing all cases, ensuring that immigrants are who they say they are. Okay, that's all I have for you today, guys. Please make sure you're keeping up with your vocabulary and your notes. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not,